Greetings and salutations, nerds. You're listening to Praying for Superpowers,
a podcast about the deeper meanings, messages, and intricacies hidden within nerd culture. I'm Peter Jordan.
And I'm Trevor Sharon, and today we're talking about Iron Man, specifically his PTSD in the third movie.
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've got me doing. That's a quote from Tony Stark in the first Iron Man movie. Pepper Potts comes downstairs and finds him getting out of his suit that's kind of welded to his body almost because of the tank missile and bullet holes that have riddled it. And I think this is something that we just don't notice.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3 gets a really bad rap. I did not love it. Most people did not love it.
I didn't like it either.
But the purpose of the movie, to me, was really awesome. That they wanted to showcase Iron Man's post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And I think people, you might be listening and thinking, what? He has PTSD? And he does. So in the first Iron Man movie, right, he's kidnapped, almost dies, lives in a cave, and you see in that movie, he has breakdowns. He just sits down for no reason. He gets the shakes, and it's more subtle. And then in Iron Man 2 and the Avengers, you see similar things.
Yep.
Getting slightly worse each time. And he almost dies, right, at the end of the Avengers movie. Spoiler? I'm not going to worry too much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's important for this story.
Yeah, we need to know. So from here on out, the spoilers are going to be... They're going to be there. I'm going to try not to give too much away, but they are going to be there.
Yeah. And we might save you from having to watch the third movie. It was hard to watch.
It was hard to watch. I could watch it again, but I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm not like what.
Well,
Marvel
and this
movie
might make
watch?
you more interested in watching it too, especially to see how mental health is incorporated in this story. And this is something that I found really interesting, seeing how mental health is portrayed in movies and in books, and how it does. Sometimes it either helps with the stigma that we have around mental health, or it just makes it worse. And I think that Iron Man does a pretty okay job of showing us a good side of PTSD that helps us to understand the people in our lives who have PTSD.
Yeah.
And so to explain, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Typically, it comes after a traumatic event. So Iron Man having an event where he is about to die and he thinks that he's going to die and then being rescued from that would fit under that criteria. But this can also be shame is treated the same way in your body as trauma. And so it can be a shameful event. It doesn't have to be...
And it doesn't have to be physical either.
Right.
A big part of his PTSD, I think they don't highlight it exactly, but he says after New York everything changed.
Yeah.
And to me what that says is oh man, I have to rethink my existence. There are aliens trying to destroy the world. There's magic. Thor, the god of the Norse mythology, is real, like kind of this huge thing.
Yeah. His
world's turned upside down, and we kind of arrive at kind of at a really difficult crossroads for Iron Man.
Yeah.
And you were going to read the...
Yeah, so I have the diagnostic manual for diagnosis. This is the DSM-5, which counselors, psychologists, mental health professionals use for diagnosing. And I just wanted to go through a couple of the criteria that Iron Man fits. And so if we look at what it takes, typically you just have to meet... I think it's 3 in the DSM-5 for post-traumatic stress. The first one, exposure to an actual or threatened death, serious injury. We see that in the Avengers movie.
Yes.
He almost dies.
And in the first and second Iron Man movies.
Yeah, so he's got plenty of events that would fit under that. B is the presence of one or more of the following intrusion symptoms. And so recurrent, involuntary, intrusive, distressing memories. We see him have flashbacks.
Yeah.
We see him have moments where he is put back into that memory, which happens a lot with trauma. C, persistent avoidant stimuli, so avoidant behavior around that kind of thing. And so you see him put away the Iron Man suit.
He blows them all up because he doesn't want to experience anymore. That's the end of Iron Man 3. If you've seen the other Avengers movies and you haven't seen that one, it kind of makes no sense because he has his suits again.
Right.
But he wrecks all of his suits in an attempt to overcome that part of his PTSD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we see the avoidant behavior. So we're already at 3 of the diagnostic
So
requirements.
he has PTSD. Right.
He also, D, is negative alterations in cognitions or mood associations with the traumatic events. One of this can be insomnia or sleep difference. And we see that because he's up working in the shop.
He literally says, we come to bed and I don't sleep. I go downstairs, I work out, I work on my suits.
We see in E, marked alteration or arousal reactivity associated with the traumatic event. Going on for a certain amount of time. And so it keeps happening, sleep disturbance, stuff like that. We see this has happened over the course of several months. And then finally, I would say that he kind of fits a couple of the one thing that is interesting in this movie that we don't see in reality is he gets through his PTSD almost like in a single event.
Right, which is not accurate. You need counseling. You need people who care for you. You need attention to get through PTSD.
Yeah. And we might be able to consider that he has a panic disorder because we will go to the restaurant scene and he is experiencing a panic attack. Yeah. However, in the DSM, we have to rule out any comorbid diagnoses. And one of the ones listed specifically is PTSD. And since PTSD seems to fit what Tony Stark is going through more, that means we have to rule out a panic disorder
first before we can treat.
And so, and I think it's really important. PTSD is something that is far more common than we think. And I think when we think about PTSD, we automatically go to veterans.
Yes. We live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which has 3 major military bases.
Yep.
So, and this is a military town. We have so many families moving in and moving out as soldiers are stationed and restationed. And so in this town, we see a lot of people who have PTSD. I work in a medical field as well, and I have a lot of patients come in where they've, previous diagnosis of disabilities or what have you, and PTSD is checked almost more often than not, probably 40% of the time I see it, which is a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to recognize also that there are moms who have really difficult labor experiences that have PTSD because of that. There are children who, so this is another example that we will go into further in another episode, but Batman, if we look in the Dark Knight series, he falls down a well, and that's a traumatic experience that is compounded when his through his parents dying and all of this. But we can see that as a form of PTSD. It doesn't have to be a war situation. It doesn't even have to be a situation that we may look at and say, oh yeah, that's traumatic. Our brains process things differently. And the cool thing in Iron Man 3 is the way that his symptoms present is, easy for somebody who understands what's going on to say like, oh yeah, that's the avoidant behavior.
Yeah. So I just give you a breakdown of a scene. He's in a bar with Rhodey, right? Who is the War Machine or the American Patriot, or the Iron Patriot, and Iron Man is drawing with his crayons on his kids' menu, right? So to me, that seems like avoidant behavior, because he's not interacting with the people around him on purpose because they want to talk to him as Iron Man, and then he breaks a crayon as he's coloring, and it's just like, I broke a crayon. Like it's this big deal that this crayon snapped in his hand, and he starts freaking out a little bit. And this kid comes up to him and whispers, "How did you get out of the wormhole?" And he it flashes him in the wormhole for a second, and he stumbles out of the bar, gets on his Iron Man suit, and he starts talking to Jarvis, and he's like, "Jarvis, what is it? Am I having a heart attack? Nope, your heart's normal. Okay, was I poisoned?" And he says, "Nope." Okay, what's happening? He's like, "I believe that you are having a panic attack, sir." and this is the first time this has happened to him, and so it's this like shocking realization that it's in his head for how real it is, because it is real,
Yeah.
but it is in his head.
Yeah.
Nothing is physically happening to the rest of his body, but it just feels like it.
Yeah. And anxiety attacks are anxiety attacks are a physiological thing, and so but it doesn't have to have anything trigger it necessarily. It can come on, if you have general anxiety disorder with panic attacks or anxiety attacks, it can just happen, and you may not even recognize what's triggering it. And so it's really interesting to see a hero, somebody who is lauded to be this strong and invincible. I mean, it's the incredible Iron Man. He's awesome. He's got impenetrable armor. He can always figure out a way to come out of a situation. And then he has an anxiety attack.
And he loses all of the Iron Man Tony Stark-ness about him.
Yeah. And it's scary for him because we see the power and then the weakness, and we experience that in our own lives when we have it. So anyone who has had an anxiety attack, it is a survival moment. Everything in the world stops, and you are stuck trying to figure out how to stay alive in that moment, how to move forward. It is a crisis moment, and I think that it's really powerful to see heroes that are human and see that they are affected by this too, because I think it gives us hope that if Iron Man can have an anxiety attack, then it would make sense that I can too. And Iron Man comes back from it, which shows strength. I'm able to come back from it too, which shows my strength.
Yeah.
And in a way can make me a superhero. And it's hard to think that way, and I don't think that's normal, but it is encouraging to see the struggle and how somebody else can do it well, and then to associate that with somebody that we idolize, like Iron Man.
Yeah. Yes. I was just thinking about how the other Avengers treat him, and it's not how we would like him to be treated.
Yeah.
Well, before we even get to the other Avengers, if we look at the How It Should Have Ended YouTube video, so I would encourage you to go on YouTube and watch the Iron Man 3 PTSD. There's just a cut together of all the scenes that show him having his PTSD moments, and then in the How It Should Have Ended, I'm not an exact quote, but Tony Stark in this YouTube video says, "And because I'm Iron Man and I'm awesome, I'm not going to have an emotional breakdown and freak out. I'm just going to defeat the enemy." And it's like it blows the whole movie's purpose away.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy for them to pick through the rest of the movie, which is what they do. They make fun of plot holes and mistakes in movies. That's a joke, and that's the point. But definitely not how it works.
Right.
I survived a traumatic event and I'm just going to be fine because I'm awesome is not a realistic thing.
And yet we as individuals
think that
hold
about
ourselves to that.
Yeah, that high standard. And we're like, you're okay. Stiff upper lip. You got this. Work through it. Be a man. That kind of mentality is something we keep inside ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think, if you look in the Age of Ultron, and in in Civil War, and then you look in the most recent Avengers Infinity War, you see Iron Man's PTSD again and again.
Yep. It is something that marks him. Something that I really like is this definition of resiliency, and a lot of people will think, resiliency is the ability to bounce back into form or to find the original shape that you had after something. But really, resiliency just looks like taking form that adapts to what has happened. Because when you have a traumatic event like that, Iron Man, Tony Stark will never
be the same,
be able to go back to who he was before that moment. And we see this in how he is visibly marked for the rest of the series. Always, with the arc reactor, and then emotionally and character-wise when after Avengers 2, or the Avengers, I think it's just the first one. And I really like that because it is a misconception that we can go back to the way things were. After an event like that, we have to find a way to adapt and to become to live differently, because it is different. If you lose your arm, you can't just go about life acting like you still have that arm.
Right. People are like, hey, what's wrong? Just grow your arm back. You're fine. You know, that's the same as someone saying, don't freak out.
Yeah.
When a car backfires and an ex-soldier dives for cover because it's his natural response to what sounds like a gunshot, you can't just man up through that. That is a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's happening at a very core level in your brain.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can work through that through EMDR and through therapy, and you can get to a point where you don't have that same reaction. But even then, you will never go back to the circle that you were. There will be something different about you. And that doesn't mean it's bad at all.
Yeah.
There's such strength in being able to adapt to the new thing, the way the world is now. Okay, there's magic in the world. Okay, there are aliens in the world. Okay, Thor exists in this world.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to figure out a way to remain myself, to do what I need to do, and to live in the calling and the purpose that I have in light of all of these things. And that's going to look different than before I knew that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we see both I need to adapt and I need to protect mentality come out when we meet Peter Parker in Captain America Civil War, because Spider-Man, you know, he's 16 and he's fighting and he like gets injured, and Iron Man is like, that's it, you're done, you're going home. No, you're going home. Like, don't argue with me. Yeah. And he's like, I need this kid because like this is important.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the kid is in danger, I feel like there's a sense of fatherhood, there's a sense of care that's like, I don't want this to what happened to me happen to this kid.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you're going home. And then he's like, I'm going to build you a bulletproof bodysuit that has a million different things that'll keep you alive on it.
Yeah.
Because I can't think about you going around New York fighting all of these criminals or joining me in a fight and getting injured like you are. You know, and like, that is another character change brought on by his traumatic experience.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that. That's really, really cool to think about.
And so like, I don't know, there's a lot of relationships in the Avengers, right? There were like 63 named characters in the Infinity War Part 1. And like Iron Man has different interactions with a lot of those. His interactions with Bruce Banner is his best interaction, right? Bruce is his best friend. They're both really big nerds. They're really smart. They both have multiple doctorates. And like in Age of Ultron, Bruce asks Tony, he's like, hey man, how are you? Like, and he like, there's a real emotional scene where Bruce is actually trying to figure out how Tony is doing with kind of this PTSD.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he doesn't have that name for it, but he cares. And we don't see that from Thor.
Yep.
And it's kind of to be expected. He's a warrior god. He's pretty much invincible. We don't see that from Black Widow and Hawkeye, even though they're very human characters. We see a little bit of it from Rhodey, War Machine. And surprisingly, I think we see more humanity and Vision at the end of Age of Ultron.
Yep, absolutely.
Than we see from a lot of these other characters.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, to think about, you know, what are the mental health aspects of the Hulk? This is a person who has another entity within himself that is full of rage and anger, and he knows that if he is angry enough, it will trigger a change in him. And so this is, you know, I would see this as somebody who really struggles with anger, but understands, is self-aware enough to recognize when that's triggered. And there's an understanding that people who struggle with mental health have for other people who struggle with mental health, because they're like, yeah, that's rough. That sucks. That's hard. And if you haven't experienced that, it's really hard to have empathy. You know, if you've never experienced anything like what's going on in a person's life, it's almost impossible to have empathy, because you need to find something in your own experience that is similar enough that you can kind of put that in front of your eyes and have a lens into what's going on in the other person. And that doesn't mean that you say like, oh yeah, I had this one thing happen in my life,
right?
And so I know what's going on.
It's like when someone's family member dies and then you talk about your dog dying. you're missing it. Yeah, that's not a parallel.
Right.
The amount of emotion there is not going to be the same at all. But you are trying. You're trying to kind of get close to that. To
And
have
you can
that
do that
empathy.
without saying, "Oh yeah, I remember when my dog died." You can do that in your head.
Yeah, you can be like, yeah, it was really hard when my dog died. I can't imagine my father dying and how hard that would be. I think kind of the last thing is just where it's headed. Iron Man.
Oh man.
So this is a spoiler for Infinity War. So if you haven't seen Infinity War, go ahead and just...
And if it hasn't been spoiled on Facebook for you already...
I know. Just fast forward to the end of the video, because if you complete watching the video or complete listening to the podcast, that's better for us.
Yeah.
But just, this is a spoiler for Infinity War. You've been warned. Iron Man is alone...
Yes.
On the moon Titan...
Yep.
In our solar system, circling Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
He's just watched Peter Parker die.
In his arms.
Doctor Strange, who is unbelievably literally to Iron Man, unbelievably powerful. Yep. He's watched most of the Guardians of all of the Guardians of the Galaxy that were there fade away into dust. And so at the end of that movie, what we're left with is a broken, grieving, triggered, his PTSD is severely happening to him.
And compounding.
Compounding at an unbelievable rate, alone, farther from Earth than he's ever been, and he is stuck. Yeah. There's nothing he can do.
And one thing on this point that's I think is really important is when it comes to mental health and when it comes to PTSD, isolation is so dangerous and so counterproductive to health. And there are a lot of times where if you struggle with depression or anxiety or PTSD, your natural tendency is to isolate. And that's not what you need. You need community to come around you. And so I want to encourage our listeners and our viewers that if you know of somebody who's struggling with PTSD, depression, anxiety, any kind of mental health struggle, don't let them be in isolation. Reach out to them. And they may push away, but be there. Be consistent with them. And if you're in that place of struggling, reach out. There are people around you that want to be a part of your life if you let them in. And there are, sometimes we just need a paid friend, which is Irvin Yalom's phrase for counseling sometimes.
Yeah, we'll have some links underneath the video and on our website, some good phone numbers, just of different people you can call. And there's always someone to talk to. Yeah. Even if it's not someone you know. There's never, you're never going to be as alone as Iron Man is on the moon Titan.
That is true.
You're always here on Earth. There are always humans going to be near you.
And even he had Jarvis.
No, well, at that time he had Friday.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Because Jarvis.
At least he had Friday.
He had Friday. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us today. That episode was a little bit heavier for you than you're probably used to, listeners. But it's important, it's real, and it's nerd culture.
Yeah. We'll have more fun with Batman, I promise.
Yeah.
We'll catch you next time.